Okay, this is going to be probably quite a long video because I'm answering a big question. So if you want to know what my favourite clean amp tone is, well then watch me find out in this video. But I'm hoping really that it's to help, well, everyone hear 17 different amps, all different sorts of amps, all clean, and just get a chance to hear for yourself. What do you like? It's a question I received last week and I answered it in a Q&A and it got me really thinking. I want to really hear all these amps together. So we've got 17 amps. I think it's going to be pretty good fun, this one. Now, why don't we start over here with well, I sort of call it at the moment Tone Henge, which is very cliched and cheesy, so I won't ever say that again, I don't think. But you get my point. Quickly, before we get to that, it's my 12,000 sub giveaway, which I'm announcing the winner for on Friday. You have to subscribe to the channel, and if you carry on watching this video, I'll let you know what else you need to do, but I won't leave you waiting too long. Anyway, you can win a set of Sunbear PAFs. You can choose between his 57, his 58, and his 59 set. I love the 58 probably the most. In this video, I'm using a neck 59 PAF. And hopefully tomorrow, so the day before the giveaway, you'll hear the 58 as well. Okay, let's get on the video because there is plenty to look at. We're going to start with this stack here, which I would say are 4 big, loud amps. Marshall and Vox type amps tend to have very direct cleans. That's not to say I don't like them. In fact, 1 or 2 of these could be my favourite out of the whole lot, and I'll tell you more about that in a minute. If you see me using an amp that has no reverb, then I'm using this Topanga by Catalin Bred reverb pedal. I also have this delay pedal on for the whole video, and I think for almost every amp I use 2 different delay settings, a shorter one and a longer one, so you'll hear bits of that. The other thing is, at the end of the video, you will hear a completely random order of the amp clips back to back, mixed around. But for the most part of the video, I'm going to break it up into sections. And if you've seen one of these long, big amp videos I've done before, I sort of split, you know, like say Marshall head types, 2 rocks, Fender types, other types, so that we can compare them. Just before we get on, I would love to do more of these. They are the most intensive work-wise videos that I do. They take about 3 days, sometimes 2, sometimes 3 days. But I'd love to do more. So why don't we do this? If I can get 300 likes or 15,000 views in the next 2 weeks on this video, then I'll do another one. And it would be really good fun if everyone comments in the comment section what sort of idea they'd like me to tackle in the next one. So let's say we have all these 17 amps. Do you want to hear them with the same guitar but more on the edge of breakup, or with higher gain, or with a pedal, a particular type of pedal? Or do you want to hear all the cleans again but with a Strat, or something else, you know, a baritone or a Gretsch guitar, or whatever it is? You come up with the ideas and I'll pick one from the comments, or if there's a really popular one, I'll do that. So yeah, 15,000 views or 300 likes in the next 2 weeks. Let's see if we can do that. That would be great. Okay, let's crack on with these 4. Okay, I'm going to pick out one of those 4 first because I particularly liked it for this clean, and that is the Dr. Z Z80. Now, this is an unusual amp. It's a large Vox type amp it was based on like an 80 or 100 watt Vox amp from the early 60s that actually the Beatles played. I don't think they sold that many, and well, if you know Vox, you know they have things like heating problems. But a few years ago, Dr. Z wanted to make one of these, and he's figured out a way for them to not overheat, which is great. And this one has a master volume on it. Now, this particular one is hand-wired by Dr. Z himself. And I don't use it a whole lot. I'm not sure that its overdriven sound is my thing, but the clean that I've discovered today is incredible. So the master's on high and the channel volume's not very high. And I just pulled back the mids and the bass a bit, and there's so much chime in this. Let's hear that for a second. Yeah, it still has sort of like, it's not a sterile clean. It's got chime and it's got a bit of this sort of syrupy character, just very sweet and lovely to play. You'll hear me use words like that a lot in this video. How else do you describe a clean tone? I guess it can bloom, and the good amps do that. And you feel something under your fingers that isn't brittle. So that one has that in spades. Okay. I think my second favourite out of this stack is the Friedman BE50 Deluxe. And I had this on loan from Coda Guitars. I only received it yesterday, but thanks, Doug, for letting me borrow this. I've been wanting to try one of these for ages, and they had a 50 and not a 100 watt one. And actually, I didn't realise that the 50 and the 100 have 2 different clean channels, and I'm really glad I got the 50 because it has the cleaner channel. It has the Buxom Betty, which was a separate Friedman amp that, according to John at Peach Guitars, never sold that well. But it's really great that Friedman's been able to use that in the 50 Deluxe and give us an incredible clean sound. I was really actually quite taken with this and surprised at how much I liked it. There's so many knobs and buttons on this amp. I don't exactly know what I'm doing yet. I've only tried it for, a few minutes, but I put it in the clean channel and I didn't use the bright switch. And you can see the settings on the screen. This is what I really liked. It's a big clean sound. I can imagine playing Hendrix stuff on that will be incredible with a Strat. I can't wait to do that. And in fact, at some point next week, I'll do a big comparison video between that Friedman BE50 and the next amp, which is a Friedman Vintage Plex. First of all, let's hear a bit more of the BE50. Okay, so the Friedman Vintage. This is like a new line of Friedmans that came out earlier this year, and this particular amp is something, well, I've been wanting for a long time. I've been searching for an old late 60s Plexi amp, super lead. So hard to get hold of, expensive when you do. And so when I heard and saw this, I thought I've got to give it a try. Again, this only arrived yesterday. This came from Peach Guitars. I've actually bought this one. And I don't think I'll need to look for an original Marshall one. There's not many modern Marshall type amps I've tried that really feel old. It has a looseness to it and a harmonic sort of content that doesn't sound like a new amp, and that is fantastic. Now, fair enough, I'm playing it through a vintage cabinet with old speakers, but this sounds like the super lead that I had in my head. So again, I'm excited to make a video next week in more detail. But the clean, maybe I've not set it the best. It's almost veering on not clean, but I think that's probably a plexi thing, and I'm sure I'll be able to dial in more clean tones. It's brutally loud. The master volume is only halfway up, and yet my ears were bleeding, but in a good way, sort of. Yeah, let's hear that. Okay, I'll tell you more about that amp next week when we see it more. Lastly, the Marshall JTM45. This is a 1965 vintage one, which has 6L6s, because they started with 6L6s and then moved on to KT66s and then moved on to EL34s. So this is the earliest type, and hard to dial in. Well, in fact, very hard for me to dial in because my knobs are basically not readable. But I dialed in a tone that I quite liked. I could have done it probably differently. There's no bass left in the knob. I mean, it's off. The presence is on full, the mids are on full, the treble's nearly on full. I probably should have pulled back the mids a little bit. And then I'm using the high bright channel and then jumpering it. And I had the volume about halfway up on the bright and about a quarter of the way up on the other one. Let's hear that. So I don't think it sounded bad at all. But out of these four, I think the Dr. Z was pretty special. I've never had much chance to play Voxes, but if they all have a clean tone like that, then I'd happily use that. And the Friedman BE50, I think it's like the most idealized Marshall clean, I guess. Is it Marshall-y? It almost sounded Fendery. It's sort of shimmery. Very exciting sound and really exciting amp to look at in general. I'll be getting my head around that in the next week. The Plex and the JTM, less favourite for cleans. I really like the JTM for that old British blues sound, and I really like the Plex for Hendrixy stuff and more riffy, humbuckery, gainy stuff. So, you know, I wouldn't be going to them for cleans necessarily. That's not to say I didn't like them at all. I still did. Okay, we've got to do the Fenders next, and I'd say traditionally people consider Fender maybe to have the best clean sound. I can't say I disagree. But it'd be really interesting to hear what these 5 amps are like, and you might get a surprise, which surprised me, to be honest, one of the 5 amps, because 4 of them are vintage Fender amps, and one of them is much less vintage, although it is actually 20 years old. Let's go through them one by one, okay, in sort of age order, I'd say. Let's start with the 59 Bassman. So that's my vintage 1959 Bassman, which I actually got in the same trade with the Marshall JTM45, which is really interesting. Obviously, the two amps are supposed to be pretty similar schematically. Differences are in the actual type of or make of parts, an exact spec of some of the parts, but the circuit is very similar, and yet they do sound quite different. I'd be interested to plug one or other amp into the other speaker and see what difference that makes. I preferred this Bassman to the Marshall from earlier. It might just be the way I set it. Now the Tweed Bassman is a big amp, right? It's a 4x10. It's quite brutal if you whack it up, and it doesn't bloom maybe in the same way at this volume as a smaller Tweed would, right? If you have a Lazy J or something like a Lazy J 10 or 20, those bloom amazingly, but these are sort of like 40 watts of quite heavy metal. Nonetheless, I really enjoyed that clean. I thought it's got so much character. It's got a lot of oomph. You know, the Bassman is a bass amp, as is this Marshall JTM45 is the bass version, as opposed to the lead, I guess. And yeah, you can feel that. It's muscular is the word I would say, but it doesn't have quite the bell-like character of the later blackface amps, which we'll hear now. I'm not going to go in exact age order with these three, but these are all three vintage blackface amps. Let's start with the Supro Reverb I have, which I think is a 67. So in recording, this is one of the best sounding amps, I think, out of the whole video. But in playing, it's one of the harder amps to play, even once I'd managed to remember to put the reverb on, because there is something quite, maybe brittle is the right word. Again, this is like a 40 watt amp, 40 or 45 watts, and 45 watts, I think, of 4x10, similar size to the Bassman, completely different tone, isn't it? Much more glassy, much more what you think of really with Fender cleans, and beautiful to hear. Beautiful in the room as well. The 4x10 cabinets really fill up a room. But at this volume, there's not a huge amount behind the fingers of like sustain. So it does make it a bit harder to play. Having said that, near the end of the video, I'll tell you my top 3 or 4 amps out of the whole lot. I wonder if the Supro Reverb will be in it. We'll find out. Okay. Now, this massive amp that sits behind me is a dual Showman. It's an 85 watt amp. And I'm not playing it through the 2x15 that's underneath it because that's a closed back cab. It's quite brutal. And so I've plugged it into the 2x12 2-rock cab that the 2 rocks will also be played through. The dual Showman has got quite a different sort of topology, I think is the right word, I don't know, to the other blackface amps I've got. For example, if I turn down the treble, middle and bass knobs, there won't be any volume. So each of them is like a gain stage. So it does feel quite different from the other ones, and it doesn't have reverb built in, unlike the Super. So I'm using the pedal. But yeah, I think it has got that classic blackface tone, maybe not quite as easy to play, even compared to the Super Reverb. The dual Showman is a brute. I need to do a standalone video on it still, and I bought it along with an old-fashioned valve tape delay machine, and the preamp on that makes that amp come alive, so I should probably do a video about that. But yeah, it's a big blackface. Hendrix used one for a few months, and I just love having it here. I don't use it very often, but lovely clean again. Right, the next one is a bit of a headache, this amp. So I bought this at Norm's Rare Guitars. It's a 65 Deluxe Reverb. The price was quite attractive because it had been modded. At the time, it had a master volume and it has a JBL speaker, not whatever was originally in the Deluxe Reverb. So I imported it from Norm's after I'd visited there. And actually, I think I'll try and include a clip here of LEMMO. If you watch Norm's Rare Guitars channel, the guitarist who does a lot of their stuff, LEMMO, is great.
Yeah, because we have actually original ones too, but there's actually a few. These were just got those shipped in, so these are new. That green one is used.
Oh, yeah. After Danny Alva, he's got the like that.
The red one.
It's actually this is a brown one. It's got the.
No, I saw that, yeah.
Sounds great.
It sounds lovely, yeah.
You see some. It's very articulate.
Mm-hmm. It's got a different speaker than normal, hasn't it? It's
Yeah,
got a JBL in there.
Yeah, it has that breakup.
Yeah. What volume have you got it?
It's all there.
Yeah, I asked him to play and he played for a minute. So that really is a much better demo than I've done. But since then, I've had it reverted back to the standard sort of scheme. There's no master volume, which is great. And I want to remove this JBL. It's not for me, this JBL. I want the amp to grind a bit more. You know, these 6v6 Deluxe Reverbs, I want to get more oomph out of it, sort of like, you know, gritty tones. So I started taking out the speaker the other day, and I was going to make a standalone video about it. I've recorded some clips of it with the JBL, but I can't get the flipping thing out. I've taken all the nuts off. You'll hear the reverb in the clip is so strong. I think that's because I've not yet screwed the reverb tank back down. The chassis is just loose in the amp because I've taken it all out to try and get the speaker out, and the speaker is stuck to the baffle, and I really need to get that out carefully or take it to someone else to do it. Likely I'll damage whatever the cork front on the speaker is, but that's okay, you can replace that. So the JBL is a good, clean speaker. Some people love the JBL and some don't. It's more like a hi-fi-ish sounding speaker. So this amp is a very cool thing to have. I always wanted a Deluxe Reverb. Maybe I should have gone for one that's more standard, but I saw this there. It was too good of an opportunity to pass up over at Norm's. Yeah, let's hear it here. Yeah, so it's got a lot of character, obviously much smaller wattage than the Super, the Bassman and the dual Showman. So you get quite a different tone out of it. It's not as big in the bottom end. It's a little bit, it's got slightly more mids. You can't actually control the mids on there. So, you know, maybe it's whatever the scheme is, the circuit is, has more mids in it maybe, or you just can't take them out. But I enjoy it. I'm still yet to get really to grips with the Deluxe Reverb. I need to put the speaker I want in, which is an Alessandro speaker. Okay, here comes the big surprise. The Hot Rod Deluxe Mark III that I bought maybe over 20 years ago, 20-ish years ago, and barely used. I did a video with it recently, making it sound, well, trying to make it sound like a Joey Landreth 2 Rock. I'm wanting to do more of those videos because I think you guys like them. Let me know if you do, and I want to do a whole set of making the Hot Rod Deluxe sound like X amp with pedals and blah, 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 blah. But I rarely put it in the clean channel and just play it clean. I mean, I don't play this amp because, you know, I've got so many other amps I want to play and I never just think of the Hot Rod Deluxe. I'm really surprised at how it sounds. So there you go, clean. It's got a really pleasant tone. That sounds patronizing. I don't mean it to be, but like you hear a lot of bad things about Hot Rod Deluxes and people get a bit bored of them because often it's the backline amp that's there instead of a Super Reverb or a Deluxe Reverb or the more expensive amps. And yeah, I thought that sounded really nice. It was nice to play. You know, the Hot Rod Deluxe, obviously it's in the name. It has a bit of heat to it, doesn't it? You know, the drive channel is pretty drivey for a Fender. And even that clean, even though the volume was set quite low, I think 2.5 or 3, there was something behind the fingers, something nice to feel. So I was really impressed with that. I hate to say it. So out of those Fenders, I couldn't tell you which is my favorite. Maybe my favorite recording is the Super Reverb, and my favorite to play, maybe the Bassman. There's always something special about turning on that Bassman, and I don't do it too much because it's quite an original amp, and I don't want to, you know, cause it to go downhill too quickly. I want to keep that amp for a very long time, so I don't use it too often. It's a joy. Okay, I want to throw in a little amp here, sort of like a miscellaneous one. This one sitting here, the Supro. This has really surprised me. So this is also something of a first for me, I guess. Supro themselves contacted me and said, could we send you this amp to keep, and you can use it on the channel. Like, yeah, absolutely. I'd actually looked at these time and time again, and I was never sure which Supro amp I wanted. I definitely wanted to try one on the channel. So they made my mind up for me. It's the Delta King 12. It's surprisingly small, but listen to this. So I was a bit worried when Supro asked me if they could send me an amp, and that they want me to make one video about it, and they haven't told me anything about what I should say, but they just want me to make one of my sort of amp demo videos, which I'm going to do in the next couple of weeks. But I thought, what if I don't like it? And I turned it on, and the first thing I did, well, it had this, there's a switch on top which is called drive, I think. And I will already say this, that's not the most pleasant sounding thing in the world. So I thought, oh God, this isn't going to be great, is it? I've since played with it a lot more and found some great tones, which I can't wait to show you. Lots of Delta Blues stuff, obviously. It's surprisingly versatile, though. It's a small amp. It's the smallest 12-inch speaker amp I think I've ever come across. And the clean tone really just blew me away. And what's really nice is that's not particularly loud in the room. You know, this amp is going to be great for your living room, for practicing at home, but also gigging. A small gig, you may not have to mic it up, but mic'd up, it's got a really nice sound. And I had to send that off to a couple of people and just say, what the hell? I didn't think the Supro was going to do that well in this video. And yet, that recording, I really, really enjoyed that. It's nice to play. The controls are responsive, and it's a 550 quid amp. Compared to, you know, let's just say it, the two Rocks are 10 times that price, or if they're the Joey Landreth, 18 times that price. You know, the Friedmans and everything is a lot more expensive. The Bartel, which we're going to come to soon. Yeah, very pleasantly surprised. This is actually going to end up being my living room amp because I don't have one at the moment, and I really like the look of it. Okay, so I've grouped together the other sort of boutique amps, the Bartel, Starwood, the Rift Aynsley Lister, the 2-Rock Classic Reverb, the 2-Rock Joey Landreth, and the Magnatone Twilighter. Let's start with the Bartel, and actually this is the amp that I kicked this off with. I actually didn't know I was going to make this video until yesterday morning. I just plugged into the Bartel with the SG. I wanted to record those pickups and set it in its blackface setting, and just had a moment where I thought, this is the best clean tone I've ever heard. Having since recorded everything else, the Bartel is still right up near the top. A couple of the other amps maybe sort of match that feeling, which I'm going to let you know near the end of the video, which is my favourites. There's one issue the Bartel has, and I always tell everyone, it's probably the amp I currently get most questions about. It used to be the Rift Aynsley Lister, but it's currently the Bartels. The way that you set up a Bartel can be a little bit limiting. So it's got an unusual preamp thing going on, right? I've explained this so many times. I'll just do it one last time really quickly. To get the blackface setting, you put the treble and bass right up to their highest, and then you put the channel volume at about 3 to 4, and then the master volume at full. And that gives you a clean, pristine blackface sound. So then if you start increasing the channel volume above 3 or 4, so 4, let's say, you start to add some overdrive into that blackface sound. You get that sort of quite linear blackface overdrivey sound, more for bluesy stuff. And at the master volume being at its highest already, it's not the loudest thing in the world. I've got to be honest, the Roseland was much louder. This is only 28 watts, I think. Anyway, for recording, just so special. And I love the way that even with a humbucker, it's just not too bassy. He really does get that EQ right, I would say, for actual use. So I just thought this sounded incredibly good. Like, it gives you everything you want out of a Fender blackface tone, really. So not too much bottom end, but still bell-like, and lots of glass. Yeah, very special. Okay, let's go to the Classic Reverb Signature, because I often get asked, should someone buy this or that? Okay, so the Classic Reverb is a different beast really than the Bartel. If the blackface sound in the Bartel is just one part of what that can do, but it's quite limited, the Classic Reverb is like diving into the blackface thing and doing everything you can do. You know, there's different gain structures, different EQ settings, you know, boost switches for each treble, middle and bass, contouring, FET gain, etc. And it's 100 watts. Well, I've got it on the 100 watts today. I wanted as much headroom as possible. The clip you just heard had the bright switch up. When you hear it again later in the sort of assorted clip section, I think the bright switch wasn't up then, so you'll hear it's a little bit darker. I can't really pick between the two. You know, as an ultimate amp, the Classic Reverb is probably more important to me than the Bartel if I want to do the blackface sound. The quality of the sound is both incredible, you know, like there's nothing between them in that sense. I don't know, in this case, I think the Bartel just, it's the one blackface sound it does. Yeah, you can slightly tweak the parameters using the EQ, but it won't, this is its most pure form in the Bartel, and I just think it was incredibly, especially good. I think I probably left a bit on the table with the Classic Reverb. I could have tweaked it a bit better, added a bit more bass, maybe even a bit more gain. It still wouldn't have broken up. So I feel like I let the Classic Reverb down a little bit in this case. Yeah, it's hard to pick between the two. But from one Two Rock to another, the Joey Landreth. And I was a bit worried because I decided to myself I wouldn't use any tremolo in any amps, and the Joey Landreth to me has been about tremolo. It's got harmonic and bias tremolo separately, but I couldn't use it, and I was a bit worried. But I turned it on, strummed an E chord, and I think I fell off my stool. Yeah, that's a little bit special. Now, admittedly, I had the mid boost up without realizing it. And also, admittedly, fireworks. Sorry about that. And also, admittedly, it might be eking towards a little bit of gain. That is literally on my street. Sorry, just had to go and look out the window. I've got a couple of puppies at the moment and the fireworks. Well, one of them doesn't love fireworks, I'll put it that way. Anyway, the Joey Landreth, what can I say? It's the most unusual amp I've got. I wanted to play my Brown Deluxe that I built myself, my Brown Fender Brown style Deluxe, so like a 62 Deluxe that I built ahead of. I need to service it. Something has come loose and it wasn't working today. I would say the Joey Landreth is in that vein, the sort of, it's not blackface at all. It doesn't have the bell-like sound, and yet it's not like a tweed. It doesn't have the warm bloom to it, but it has something else that I think might be even more special than either. And that's one area of vintage Fender amps I need to get one of at some point, a Brown amp. But the reverb on here is also so good, and I feel like I've not given this amp. Well, I've not tried everything possible with this amp, and I've really not run this SG clean into this amp before, and yeah, this is definitely a contender for my favourite amp of the day. I was shocked. Okay, well, another amp that actually has a similar sort of thing going on, the Magnatone Twilighter. When I say similar thing, it is a deluxe type amp, so 20 odd watts, 22 I think, and it's not exactly like a Fender. It's got its own thing, and it's a bit more straight across, like the Joey Landreth. I mean, it's not so bell-like, you know. It's got a bit more of an aggressive bite to it. Let's hear that. Yeah, the Magnatone Twilighter is a really special amp, actually. Listening to the recording between the Joey Landreth and the Magnatone, I'm not sure which I prefer now. you know, the Joey's got a more unusual sound and it is a bit more dynamic perhaps, sort of jumps out at you, but the Magnatone has a sweetness along with the bite that is pretty addictive. So yeah, really enjoyed both of those. The Rift Aynsley Lister I've put in here because it's, you know, another boutique amp, but it's something so unrelated to the others. It maybe should have been in the first set of amps, even though it's not a head, it's a combo, because it is Marshall based. It is the signature amp of Aynsley Lister, and well, I don't think he necessarily wants any cleans in it because I struggle to really get any out of it, especially with the default setting, which is the bright switch pushed in, which is what you're going to hear now. Yeah, so it struggles to do clean with even with the preamp really quite low, but it is a hot amp and that's what it's there for. Not to say this didn't sound good, I actually thought it sounded really interesting and very usable, and sort of, yeah, a really great sound. It's just one of those amps that it's not really, doesn't feel related to other things. It just does its own thing, and it's I love having it for that reason. Let's just quickly hear it with the bright switch not pushed in. The bright switch being pushed in, by the way, is the default setting, but I wanted to hear what it sounded like otherwise. Yeah, so that takes away some of the gain, which maybe helps, but it also takes away what I think gives the liveliness to the amp, that brightness. So I prefer it with the bright switch in. Okay, now we're going to do a bunch of other amps. We've got the Gibson Falcon, my vintage Gibson Falcon from the early 60s. Then we've got an Epiphone Valve Junior and a solid state amp, which is a Peavey. I'm going to do these quite quickly. The Gibson Falcon I almost didn't put in the video. It's got almost no headroom at all and is very quiet. But I was shocked at how well it recorded. I promise you in this room, this is the quietest amp by far. I know I didn't have a decibel meter on today. I would say everything else was between 100 and 105 dB, spiking even higher. The Supro maybe 97, 96. This is probably 84. Yeah, it's really quiet, but the microphones picked it up beautifully. By the way, in a minute, before we get to all the end clips and everything, I will tell you how I set up my mics for today. The Gibson Falcon, it's just such an unusual amp. Again, as I say, no headroom. People have told me change the transformers. That's what people do to get more, but I don't want to. I know it's quiet, but it just does something really cool. I thought it sounded better than I expected. Still, you know, it's not a clean amp. The Epiphone Valve Junior, well, you know, these things are pretty cool. I came across them because I saw Barry Cadogan using one in a Gibson video, and I love the look of them. There's something very cool about them. And you can get some cool tones, but I would say more overdriven tones. I tried to get it clean. It's okay. It's not terrible. It's not amazing. It's an interesting choice, I think. It'd be much better into a different cabinet. This is the little closed back cabinet that comes with it, with a small speaker as well. I don't know if it's 8 or 10 inch, but it's small. If I'd put it in the 2-rock cabinet or something, it would have sounded quite different. I've done that before. Okay, this Peavey solid state thing, I confess to buying it on a whim. It was 100 quid or so on Reverb, and I was driving near that place the next week, so I wanted to try it. I didn't have a solid state amp. This makes me want to get a better solid state amp because it is terrible. I'd like to try a Roland Jazz Chorus for cleans. Yeah, this is brittle and not great, to be honest. Yeah, it doesn't sound awful. That's the funny thing with solid state, but it feels really cold and clinical and brittle, and it sounds a little bit like that. I mean, you'll hear it for a second. Yeah, for 100 quid, okay, it's not the end of the world, but that's why I put it in here. I wanted you to hear that comparison. Okay, so before I tell you what my favourite few amps were, the way I recorded this is same as my usual, but I don't often mention it. So there's an SM57 in the middle of the cone right up to the grill cloth. And then I have a ribbon mic, which is a Sontronics Delta 2, and that is about 8 to 10 inches back, slightly to one side and angled in and slightly down to the centre. Always harder to tell with this sort of square-shaped ribbon mic exactly where it's exactly facing, where the capsule is, but I like it like this, and I probably have more of that sound than the SM57. And then as a room mic, I've got an emulating mic. This is a Universal Audio Sphere Deluxe, and it's acting as a couple of different mics, which I can't remember off the top of my head, but I'll put it up on screen, and that adds the room sound and that gives you the reverb and the space feeling. And it's a very high quality thing. It runs into a Universal Audio preamp, which I do have some, there's what are called unison, preamps in there, you know, based on famous ones, Neves and things. I use those. I don't use them, like I don't change a lot of things heavily. Often it's just to do any sort of limiting if I need to, or to get things, the polarity right for phasing. Sorry, it's quite late in the day and I've been doing this all day today and yesterday. So my brain is starting to go, and luckily I'm nearly finished. Okay, right, the bit I've been looking forward to do. This is 17 amps. Should we do my top 5 of them? Okay, so in the top 5 would be the Magnatone, the Joey Landreth, the Dr. Z, the Bartel, and the Bassman. That's hard, missing out the Super Reverb, but I said 5, so I've done 5. And if I have to put them in order, probably Magnatone, Joey Landreth, Bartel, Dr. Z, Bassman or Bassman Dr. Z. It's not a hard and fast thing. There's about 10 of the amps that I would absolutely want to use if I was recording clean. The Friedman BE Deluxe, the Supro Reverb, the Deluxe Reverb even has its own thing, definitely the classic Reverb. Really that and the Bartel I would put together in this. But in terms of clean amps, I've got a much better idea of what it is that I like and what I want. But what's astonished me is apart from the Peavey and the Epiphone and the little Gibson at the end there, they can all do it so well. They all have something unique about them. But if I wanted the ultimate Fender-y clean sound, I might use the Bartel, might use the classic Reverb. Certainly the Super Reverb can do it, but it's a bit harder to play and it's bigger and harder to record and crackles and pops because it's old, but it's a very cool thing to have. You know, the Tweed Bassman is so special. I'm not sure I could use it for clean recordings again. It crackles and pops, but stick a fuzz in front of that and you're in Jimi Hendrix heaven. The Dr. Z sounded so good in this. I hadn't considered it to be a clean amp, but it really is. I mean, it's an 80-watt headroom amp. The Friedman, the clean channel is great. The Plexi I'm going to have so much fun with anyway, but I thought the clean actually was better than I expected. The JTM45 I need to tweak a bit. But let's finish on this. Clean tones aren't always the sexiest thing to talk about. Most people complain if you're using a Marshall and don't whack it all the way up. And to be honest, as time has gone forward, I've become more like that. I really do like a bit of overdrive from my amp. But there was something really special about sitting here for this day and a half of recording and playing an SG, which is not maybe classically considered a great amp guitar for cleans. You know, you represent it with big riffing stuff. And using Stewart's Sunbear pickups in there, I can tell you something that I've not come across a custom bucker, and I've had about 10 sets that could do anything like that. They will often be either too spiky or too muddy. I know people like Lola Imperials. I find them too dark, and I think those are potted. Stewart's pickups are not potted. I don't love Lola Imperials that much. Throwback makes some really interesting pickups. They've got a lot of character and a lot of transients and harmonics as well, but they can be sort of have less clarity than the Sunbears. I played some Ron Ellis humbuckers the other day, and I really wasn't that excited by them, I'll be honest with you. Yeah, the more I play Stewart's pickups, the more I think he's really nailed something here. A mixture of the original sound of a Path, just the way he in his self decides to wind and how he does his, I mean, humbuckers are wound by machine and single coils maybe more by hand, but the way he sets up his machines and does everything is particular to the maker. So look, the giveaway is going to be announced in a day and a half, 2 days. It's probably the evening on a Wednesday now. I'm knackered. So yeah, subscribe to the channel, go and watch the video that's linked below and comment what it says to comment in the video, and then your name is in the hat. And so far there's been so many, I've been really surprised. Let's get this video to 15,000 views or 300 likes so I can make more of them. I'd love to be doing one of these every other week, but that would take a lot of time. But if there's demand for it, that's certainly something I'd like to do. So I hope you've enjoyed this. What I'm going to do now is put together in random orders the clips. They're not the ones I've used already. I'd recorded more than that, so there are other clips. But yeah, see you on the next one. Cheers. Bye.